Mickey Mouse is the latest Disney property to get their own horror movie ripoff in the Mousetrap, but is it worth checking out? Cinema, where we focus on a film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below if you've seen The Mousetrap. Is it good, is it bad, or somewhere right in the middle? Let me know all that. Make sure to like this video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you're not already, join the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. But going right into the synopsis. Her friends surprise Alex on a late night shift in an amusement arcade on her 21st birthday. There's a guy dressed as a killer, as a Mickey Mouse, that is going on his own plan to kill them. And going into the positive, this is a film that knows exactly what it is. It has this title running card that sort of makes fun of itself for not being affiliated with Disney, and so it just presents the right vibe. It has its little bits of comedy here and there. It has a little bit of horror that isn't all the way shocking or terrifying, having great twists, but it still delivers on providing enough kills for Mickey Mouse being a killer and for having this guy dressed up as him and things that are possessive in the nature of what is all going on. It goes about these different antics that develops its characters in interesting and compelling ways, enough for them to be cared enough about, even if it is more of a horror B-movie that isn't strong within its storytelling. It's just a slasher film that has some cheap thrills and goes about different ways of building up the stakes, people getting picked off one by one, and while it doesn't have the highest of stakes, it delivers on what it's really asking out of the premise alone, delivering on this Disney horror ripoff, and just building up these characters along the way that have these different inner relationships, and they act in ways that are mostly human enough for at least the nature of these different characteristics, these different personalities that some people can act quickly or are more fearful and can't really act as well, because in these terror situations you can't really make your decisions well, especially given the condition, given all the circumstances of being locked into the arcade and just being placed within the funhouse. That's just a little nod to Mickey's Funhouse and how they're setting up the arena and all these different characters. Well, it isn't something I would expect much out of for what it's doing, and it already sets itself up to be a spoof of sorts. It has what it needs to in order to deliver on a little bit of fun along the way. And going into the mix elements, there's some things with the setting that isn't so creative. The colors aren't necessarily poignant. You can tell it's somewhat cheap, even if it has a decent budget to it. And the way they create the surrounding environment, Mickey doesn't have the greatest of voice that really speaks to the nature of this iconic high-pitched character that could make it creepier based on if they made it relatively the same. And his costume isn't necessarily meant to be the Mickey Mouse costume, but it would have been cooler to get something closer to that, just so you're getting that. Even if he does have a great mask that still works for bringing something like that into live action, it delivers on an interesting premise, but doesn't always fulfill all of its questions or things that come about along the way with how it does certain characters. The performances aren't bad, but they aren't particularly star-studded cast either, and what you get out of that just feels very tame. They don't feel like great actors' performances, but it's not something I particularly cringe at the characters or their dialogue, even if the dialogue isn't always the smoothest of running courses with what you may be expecting from the film as a whole. I'd like to also mention that if you're looking for answers behind specific details of why Mickey Mouse is becoming this part of the thing, it's not really providing those answers. It sort of just happens, even though you sort of know what's going on, how things come about with this possession type of deal that's going on. It's not really telling you exactly how it happens, why it's happening this one night, why things aren't going about the other way. It's not necessarily taking a love letter to Disney because it's sort of twisting some ideas, but it's not necessarily going against telling you not to watch Disney either, and just goes about its interesting way of twisting some vibes in an interesting fashion that is sort of just mixed. It's not affiliated with Disney, so it's not necessarily something where if you love Disney you should be supporting this project, but it is for someone that if you loved Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 1 or 2, you may have a decent amount of time with this, even if it's a bad movie that just sort of goes about its own twist with what it's doing with its plot, because it's just a plain ripoff by the end of the day. And going into the negative, yes, this is a movie that is sort of a spoof of sorts, so it's good to some nature that it's so bad it's good. But it also, while it still has those performances that aren't that bad, a story that captures you just enough, it is by nature something that's meant to be made fun of in some standard. And there's certain ideas, certain crafts with a power that they give Mickey that isn't necessarily explained, isn't shown and presented how things are flowing out. The certain dialogue isn't always the best. The way certain actions come about doesn't fully explain the story as a whole, and this story is set up as a detective mystery story with one of the survivors explaining the story as they're recovering the night, and just what that unfolds goes about in an interesting fashion, but then goes on to an ending that's sort of unsatisfactory and goes into this also post-credit scene that doesn't make as much sense, at least to how things are explained. And there may be answers that are locked into why Mickey became Mickey as he is, but connecting that to what the post-credit scene has to say without spoiling it, there's some confusing things that raise some questions just within this film alone that sort of hints towards sequels, whether they're connecting it to Winnie the Pooh or this other Disney horror ripoff comedy. But it just goes about an interesting fashion of doing that in a compelling enough way that makes you know it's not meant to be totally taken seriously, but it has just not always having the highest budget that creates a smart story that develops something that you really can hone in on, go back to, even if you're going back to it just to have a good time with some of the kills, which isn't high and extreme. You're not getting a ton of gore or blood from what you're getting out of Mickey's kills. And there's something about Mickey's development. Once he gets his reveal, it doesn't feel like there's a gradual build-up with the story to where they're finally revealing it at the end or showing him firsthand. It's sort of an in-between section, but it doesn't feel like a build-up of a reveal of how he looks like. And so there's something that feels off just about that reveal that is just misplaced with the development of the story, the characters, and what you're getting out of the story as a whole. So therefore, I have to rate The Mousetrap a simply 4.5 out of 10, where it had its own nature of what it was intending, but it wasn't totally grand by the end of the day. Let me know down in the comments below if you watched The Mousetrap. Is it good, is it bad, or somewhere right in the middle? Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe, and remember ready to join in film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So let's just all make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.